Well, yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about, you know, I continue to hold that Ukraine will be militarily defeated by the end of summer, early autumn. Summer being defined by a calendar, meaning September 21st. Um, moving into October, early November, sometime in that time frame, you're going to see Ukraine militarily destroyed, and we're moving in that direction right now. They've committed their last strategic reserves. They have nothing left. There's nothing out there that can go in. So once they burn through these things, and again, a battalion of the 82nd Air Landing Brigade was basically taken off the game board yesterday in its attack against Robotyno on the Zaporizhia front, which has been the center of this fight, the most direct line between current Ukrainian positions and Tokmak, and then Melitopol, and then the Sea of Azov. They haven't gotten past, Robotyno. They haven't gotten to that other part yet. They've chewed up. I'm laughing. I apologize to do that because this is tragic. I mean, they've literally cost Ukraine untold thousands of lives. I mean, it's hard to put a number on them right now, but it's tracking nonetheless. But also by focusing on this front, and also the Ukrainians thought that they could achieve some successes in the Bakhmut front. That has been nipped, but they've sucked all the forces into these two areas, and they've left a thin line at Kupiansk up north, and the Russians had been advancing into that. And this is what I said would happen all along the entire line of contact. As the Ukrainian forces are depleted, they're going to have insufficient forces to the task of successfully holding this line. And Russia will continue to press forward on the entire line of contact. And where they're given the opportunity, where there's insufficient Ukrainian resources, Russia will move forward. Not big arrow offenses. They will just continue to press forward. And that's what we've seen. Advances of 6 kilometers, 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers. Kupiansk is in danger of falling right now. If Kupiansk collapses and there's nothing there, the road to Kharkov is open. Now, again, the Russians have to be careful not to fall into the trap that they fell into early on in this conflict, that is to take too much territory and then find themselves in a position where they don't have enough manpower to hold the territory. I think the Russian advance is going to be a very methodical advance, one that is consistent with the resources available, so that Russia maintains a solid presence on the field of battle. But the Russian force, they can draw upon 200,000 reserves that have yet to be committed to the battle. So they'll be able to expand and maintain. The Ukrainians are depleting everything. They're going to be thinning out. And now we come to what you and I have always talked about, which is the term collapse. And that's the direction we're heading towards right now, is the collapse of cohesiveness on the Ukrainian front, that the Ukrainians are going to not be able to maintain sufficient military power on the front. Russia will be able to exploit this push. And war isn't just about firepower. That we've been focusing on firepower lately, how much artillery can be brought to bear, et cetera. But war is also about fire and maneuver. And as the Russians begin to break free of this, this positional warfare that's been defined by trench lines and tree lines and such, and they start maneuvering. Now, maneuver can be brought in as a firepower multiplier, and the Russians will put the Ukrainians in untenable situations increasingly, compelling them to withdraw, giving the Russians more maneuver room. And I think you're going to see the rapid disintegration of the Ukrainian front. Where it ends, where the Ukrainians end up pulling back to, trying to consolidate, probably is going to be along the Dnieper River line, because that's a natural defensive barrier. If the Ukrainians can get behind that, blow some bridges, they've now, I think you're going to pretty much have defined the extent of the Russian advance, with one possible exception, which is, of course, if the Russians decide to make a move on Odessa and remove the Black Sea from deny Ukraine access to the Black Sea. And also something that I think that logically at this stage of the game needs to be part of the Russian end game. Whether it is or not, we'll see. And that is linking up with the Transnistria region, eliminating that potential hotspot by creating a land bridge and bringing that into Russia proper. again, this is not something Russia sought out to do. You know, if I were a Russian general, those would have been the arrows I would have been drawing at the beginning, but I'm not. Vladimir Putin isn't that guy. He wasn't looking for that kind of conflict. He just wanted to make sure that Ukraine wasn't part of NATO. But we're dealing with a different Russia today. The Russian military is, and I'll just say it straight up, they're the most capable military on the planet today when it comes to large scale ground combat. There's no other army that has the experience and the capability. The US Army is still toiling with technology that dates back to the Cold War era. And the technology defines operations and tactics. We're still using M1 Abrams tanks, the M2 Strikers, or M2 Bradleys. We've got the Striker, which is this weird creation of the global war on terror, which has no business on a modern battlefield. We don't do drones the way we should be doing drones. Our approach to drone warfare is dictated by the battlefields in Iraq and Afghanistan, not the battlefields in Ukraine. What the Russians and Ukrainians are doing on the battlefield today with drones is, it's revolutionary, and it's changing the way wars will be fought going forward. We're not there yet. The second most capable unit, organization in the world for drones is the Ukrainians, and they're being beaten by the Russians, who are doing it better. The Russians are getting ready to unleash something they call the Lancet 53, Series 53. This is, you remember I think I first saw it in Seoul. It might have been in before, but the Seoul Olympics, where all of a sudden they released all these tiny little dots of lights that went up, and they suddenly turned into a walking man and a surfing man, and they were doing all that. Those are drones, and those were drones using artificial intelligence, or basically talking to one another. It wasn't artificial intelligence; they'd been programmed. They were talking to one another, and they were all communicating and shifting around to make this happen. The Russians are getting ready to unleash on the Ukrainians swarm of drone technology. But this time, instead of little tiny beautiful drones with lights, this is going to be a swarm of Lancet hunter-killer drones that are going to take off, saturate the battlefield, and they're going to communicate with one another, do target discrimination, and then bam, hit. The Lancet right now is devastating. They've admitted, they're meeting with the Americans, we don't have a response to the Lancet. The Russians fly overhead with the Orlan 10, I think it's called. It's a surveillance drone that picks out targets and communicates the targets to a Lancet. The Lancet's not controlled by an operator. The Lancet's a fire and forget, run away. The Orlan takes over. It's looking down, picking out targets, and then it sends that to the Lancet, and the Lancet comes in, loiters around, zooms in for the kill, and kills it. Now, right now, they're doing it, one here, one there, one there. They're devastating the Ukraine. The Ukrainians are saying, we can't even move back here. The second we begin to move, a Lancet comes down and hits it. Guess what, Ukraine? It's getting ready to become much worse. When 200 of those guys take off and start talking to each other, and they take out not just one gun, but they take out your entire battery, your entire battalion, your entire brigade, all at once. That's game-changing technology, and the Russians are doing it. Nobody else in the world is doing that today. Nobody else in the world is doing that today. And the Russians are doing things tactically with these small drones equipped. They put, I guess, a 81 millimeter mortar round on them, or they could drop them. We've all seen the ones where they drop them. But they're now got these ones where the frontline troops just send them out there, boom, and they're taking out tanks, they're taking out troops, they're taking out everything. The Ukrainians are doing the same thing. I mean, they got drones coming back. I'm telling you, the battlefield's unrecognizable today with these drones going back and forth. But the West isn't ready for that. We're not prepared for that. We don't know how to do it. We don't have the technology to do it. And I always laugh when Ukraine receives, I forget where they got it from, the Swedes or the Swiss or somebody gave them, the Germans maybe, gave them the newest counter-drone technology. And I'm like, when did you guys come up with that technology? Because I know the defense industry production cycle. So in order to produce that, you actually had to reconfigure your production line, which means you had to have input, which means you had to do research. So you guys are telling me that the defensive system you're giving to the Ukrainians today was actually something conceived before this war even began, which means it ain't responding to the reality of today. Russia's got the strongest military in the world today. Thank goodness, they don't have larger ambitions than simply resolving the Ukrainian conflict. Because if Russia was everything we thought Russia was going to be, we couldn't stop them.
Well, I think there's a dynamic there that creates that outcome, in that one of the reasons that Russia is strong is because if you're fighting along your border, right, your supply lines are shorter. You can do a lot of different things than you can with these expeditionary forces that you're sending halfway across the world. So I think part of what makes a power strong is where it's fighting on all of the things. So their equipment is designed for the climate. It's designed for the terrain. It's designed for the everything on their border. So in that they have the equipment that's designed for the environment they're fighting in. Their strategic their strategies are also specifically for those types of climate. Okay, well, we know when this happens we can do this, and then it's the rainy season, and it's that blah blah blah, then it freezes for a while, that may come or go. So I also think that part of what makes a country strong is a defensive military. Defensive is always going to be stronger than offensive. You need less power. They don't have to have 10 or 12 aircraft carriers, because their aircraft are flying in their airspace for the most. Do you know what I'm saying, Scott?
No, I mean, but that's a strategic advantage. But, even on the operational and tactical advantage, there was a book written a while ago, America's First Battles, I think. Basically, it showed that as powerful as the American military is, we tend to lose the first battle. And they went through history. To give you an example, World War II, unmatched military strength, the United States. But Battle of Kasserine Pass, when we went up against the Germans for the first time, we got beat because our troops didn't know how to fight. They were not blooded. They didn't know what combat was about. You go to Korea, when the I forget, the 24th Infantry Division showed up. They were wiped out by the North Koreans. North Koreans rolled through them. Why? Because we didn't know how to fight. We were unblooded. Troops freeze when people start dying. Command and control breaks down. You don't know. Officers always talk tough in an officers club with beer flowing. I'm the best thing since sliced bread. Then suddenly the bullets start flying. You find out who really is the best thing. It's usually the quiet guy in the corner who wasn't saying much. That's the guy who's going to step up and perform. But you don't know this. So in Vietnam, when the 101st, first Cav, I think it was actually, that fought in the Battle of Ia Drang. It didn't go well for us. We got blooded. The battle for LZ Albany and X-Ray wasn't good. We adapted and we performed well afterwards. But my point is this: the Russians have already done all that. There's not a single guy on the Russian front line that hasn't seen somebody die. There's not a single officer there that hasn't been tested under the stress of combat. And it's not just any combat, it's NATO-style warfare. Massive firepower, modern technology, large scale. The Russians have done it. They've been there, they've done it. They got the T-shirt, they got several T-shirts. And so every Russian soldier there today operating is a battle-hardened veteran whose tactics have been tested using the technology that's available. There's no American equivalent right now, not a single one. SEAL Team 6. SEAL Team 6 is a bunch of guys that fly in on helicopters with perfect intelligence, hitting down and gunning down some half-armed, villagers someplace in the world. Are they elite? Yeah, they can do that very well. Put SEAL Team 6 on the battlefield, they'll all be dead in a minute because they don't know how to do this kind of war. They're not designed for this kind of war. Neither are the Rangers. Neither are, Green Berets, Delta Force. They'll all die. It's not the kind of war. This is the kind of war. This is going back to, remember Willie and Joe from World War II? A bunch of skinny, underfed guys with a beard because they haven't shaved in a long time, with red eyes, muddy, dirty. Ain't nothing sexy about them. Ain't nothing special about them. But they're the guys that get up and slog through. And they do the impossible over and over and over again, and they know what they're doing. The Russian army is full of Willie and Joes right now. guys who have been there, done that. They got the T-shirt. They know what war is. We got an army full of hotshots, guys who like to sit in a bar and talk big about battle. But none of them have been tested in this. And historically speaking, when you take an American army that's not been tested in battle and put it up against an army that has been tested in battle, we always lose the first battle. Now, the big thing about America is we tend to learn very quickly. And so I don't think anybody can say just because we'll get beat in that first battle that's the end of the American. We will adapt. We will overcome. We're one of these militaries that sometimes you need to punch us in the nose and we need to taste blood before we realize what we have to do. But we're not there yet. The Russians are. And that's a huge advantage for the Russians in any potential future conflict.